In the prefatory remarks to the forthcoming work upon the chieftain, Tecumseh, the following language is used, and we avail ourselves of the privilege of extracting from our own storehouse materials for the commencement of this new historical campaign. The courteous reader in tracing the fate of Tecumseh, as depicted in the pages of his life, will not volume I.B. fail to observe the strong analogy between the religious sentiments of the chief of the forest and those of the ancient Hebrews. The language as uttered by Tecumseh is not written by the pen of fiction, merely to uphold a theory of the brain, but gathered from the archives of a people's history to support a theory of apparent truth. The present writer will not yield to any man in the firm belief that the aborigines of North America, but North America only, and the ancient Israelites are identical, unless controverted by the stern authority of superior historical deductions. We, therefore, have formed an original theory in reference to the natives of the North, and those of South and Central America, together with the newly discovered ruined cities in and around Guatemala, and by that theory, have separated into two distinct races or people, the aborigines of the Western Hemisphere. The lately recovered ruins, cities, and temples in Central America and of which no ancient record is to be found, have shattered the chain of acknowledged history to atoms, and until that chain is again united by a firmly established theory, education herself must pause, ere she can with the wand of truth point to her rising children the history of the world, or its inhabitants. Suspicion has asserted that all the natives of the continent of Columbus might probably have been originally of Hebrew extraction. The assertion has been made in doubt and trembling, for writers have been confounded by essential contrasts in religious customs of North and South America. There were no analogies between them, which circumstance should have compelled historians to pursue another path of inquiry, and so attain a conclusive truth, but they found a Gordian knot which they could not unravel, and assuming the impatient weapon of Alexander, they destroyed it. The architecture, however, of the Yuans of Copan, Palenque, Uxmal, and their time-honored associates, has furnished a Rosetta Stone to aid the new translation of the hieroglyphical history of now ancient America, and if our theory is true, not only have the Israelites walked the land where the sun bestows his last smile, but another nation, in which was retained the primitive language of the diluvian world, previously trod that soil as aborigines, and beyond all this, if our thread of Ariadne led us faithfully, if not, the Almighty Father who gave the thought will pardon its application, yes, beyond all. The bounding feelings leaping at events, at once classic and venerated, do we contemplate another branch of our theory, for, if we do not write in error, and our perfect faith assures us that we do not, then the trembling hand which sought and doubt the Saviour's wounds, has been outstretched in sacred oratory even in those southern wilds. The bold, yet conquered voice, which uttered in hallowed and confirmed faith, my Lord and my God, has given forth its missioned eloquence even in the Western Hemisphere, and there, the sainted ashes of that apostle may yet repose. B2. The preceding extract may be viewed as the exordium of an original history to follow, wherein, if we fail, it will be, the boldness of the attempt and not the deed confounds us. Taking as a basis for our illustration the rules of argument, we will first identify one race, and then prove that the existence of another is not only apparent, but absolute. For the convenience of the general reader, the word Mexican, until the true name is established, will be applied throughout the following pages to all Central and South America, for the word South may be confounded with that portion of the Republic of North America so denominated, and especially with the American reader. The fundamental error with all writers upon the Aborigines of America is that they have viewed them as one people. Authors have, therefore, been confounded by the different customs and ceremonies of religion as practiced in the two great divisions of the continent. They have seen that the natives were, to a certain extent, in one part of the vast domain, idolaters, and not in the other, that the North was essentially republican in every aspect of its political existence, while that of Mexican America was as essentially composed of kingdoms and empires, and governed by despotic monarchs, and that republics were interwoven with them, that each man in the North was a warrior, and an equal, acknowledging no superior but their leader in time of battle, and should he fall in action, there was not a member of the tribe in which they politically moved, but could have taken his place, and filled it with similar courage and ability. In Mexican America they were not equal, but from the emperor they descended by degrees to the serf and slave. In that country, stone and stucco temples and palaces were, and still continue to be found, erected with costly magnificence, and in which were jeweled idols to which they bent the knee. Their rich dwellings were splendid mansions, adorned with sculptured and beaten gold, and graced with the works of art, and as a people, enjoying all the refined elegancies of life, but in the North. Their temple was the azure canopy of Jehovah, adorned with its myriads of golden stars, and when beneath that sublime dome, they bent the knee, it was to the Almighty God alone. Their palaces were the gorgeous vistas of the forest, the columns were the gigantic trees, each year increasing in their state. Linus, their shadowy and painted roofs were the far-spreading branches, and nature's tinted foliage. Their mansions were those of independent wanderers, even the simple tents of Israel, and as for jeweled idols and figures of beaten gold, they presented the diamonds of the human eye, radiant with intellectual beams, and glancing from the living emblem of the first and priceless image, placed in Eden's garden by the architect of the universe. Notwithstanding these essential opposites in character and policy, to which may be added that of physiognomy, writers have glanced at them as one race, sprung from the same branch of the human family, and without defining which, and when they could not reconcile such apparently unaccountable distinctions and diversities, they have thrown upon the shoulders of the Mexican the mantle of manly virtue belonging to the North, and upon this race they have thrust the idolatrous vices and the festering robes of luxury justly claimed by the former people, and by this easy manner of disposing of a question, have seemingly satisfied themselves that by blending the crimes of both, to the exclusion of the virtues of either, that they were all savages and no matter from whence they came. Thus have they formed their conclusions concerning 50 millions of human beings, although directly in opposition to evidences of fact, to deductions by relative reasoning, and to all Christian faith, which alone should have rejected so cruel a decision, founded as it is, not only on slight, but less investigation. A sufficient identity of the northern native is now required, in order to establish the national distinction between the aborigines of the two Americas. In all civilized countries, when the lex scripta fails to develope, or protect, the historical events and rights of a nation or of an individual, then the lex non scripta is not only not rejected, but it is actually brought forward to establish and support the customs and privileges of a bygone day. This traditionary evidence, handed down from sire to son, is received in proof of a foregone conclusion. It gives an insight into the times of which no written record is left for the investigation of Argus-eyed posterity, it carries us back to customs, civil, military, and religious, that otherwise might be lost to the archives of history. Admitting, therefore, this train of reasoning, we bring it to bear upon the present important subject, important in the highest degree, for the time is now past when the Western Hemisphere is to be dated from the rediscovery by Columbus. His giant, but over-applauded name, like the ruins of Palenque, is but the lettering of a volume to indicate in the HBR area of the universe that such a work was written, the work itself the Great Khan. Teenant has yet to be read, and the historical authors identified, nor will the well-grounded supposition that the Welsh prince, Madoc, colonized in America 2 centuries before the Genoese, or that the Norwegian landed 3 centuries anterior to the Welsh, enable us even to unclasp the volume, to accomplish this, and its translation, an historic CI must be cast over a period of more than 2,000 annual changes, of nature's revolving but faithful time-glass. Granting then, that when the lex scripta will not cover a subject, the lex non scripta must be investigated to establish a position, the first, then, will not apply to the Aborigines of the North for it does not exist, the latter only, or the unwritten history of their race must be had recourse to prove their originality and identity, traceable back to time immemorial, from their present customs and traditions. We think that it will instantly be admitted, that all religious ceremonies are the strongest proofs of the characteristics of a people or race, of which no written history exists, for there is something so indescribably sacred in the conscientious actions of man with the supreme God, that none but the maniac atheist could be doubt that those actions should be received as the living features of a nation, when seen to be recognized and acknowledged, with as much certainty of identity, as when a mother gazes upon her fondly cherished child. The customs forming the analogy between the northern natives and the ancient Israelites will now be reviewed with as much brevity as the subject will permit, in order to establish an essential point of the present theory, viz., the separation of the Aborigines into 2 distinct people. The reader, perhaps, will meet us at the threshold of argument by the question, how can an Indian be of Israel? We will answer this, and refute the misnomer before the analogies are investigated. The name Indian as applied to the original inhabitants of either, or both the Americas, Canada, the islands in, or adjacent to, the Gulf of Mexico, has no authority founded upon truth. The name was given in error, and has been so continued from the time of the Genoese to the present day. Throughout this work no position will be advanced that cannot be defended. The wrongful appellation originated with Columbus, and for proof of the assertion the following is presented. The shadow of the earth upon the moon during an eclipse plainly testified that the planet upon which we live was round. The travels of Marco Polo by land to the East Indies about 1269 related that those lands stretched far towards the east. About 2 centuries after this, it occurred to Columbus, upon perusing those travels, but more especially from having obtained intelligence from the final conquest of the Canary Islands in 1483, and information while resident in England, which circumstances will be investigated hereafter, that by a voyage towards the west, thus traveling, as it were, around the globe, he should meet the extremity of those lands, and as the Discovery of a sea passage to the East Indies was the great object of navigation in the 15th century. Columbus made the bold attempt, founded upon previous knowledge of migration, and discovered the island of St. Salvador and those adjacent, and thinking that he had reached the eastern extremity of the Indies according to his theory, he then named those isles the West Indies, because they were discovered by sailing west. The discovery of the continent followed during his third voyage, and believing all the land to be of the Indies, the inhabitants of the isles and of the mainland were, as a natural consequence, called by Columbus under one general appellation, viz. Indians. Subsequent geographical discoveries have proved the great error of the Genoese, but the name of Indian was given at that time, and it has been continued although at variance with the truth, and it has had a material effect in checking inquiry. Concerning the Aborigines, who having been called Indians, the name seemed at once to specify their origin, but it would have been equally as just, if he had determined to sail for Britain, and an unforeseen gale having cast him upon the island of Sardinia, and then from believing that he had reached the intended object of his voyage, he should have called the latter inhabitants British. We, therefore, discard the name of Indian as applied to the natives of the western continent. It will be retained in the tragedy of Tecumseh, for local purposes, and write of them as the Aborigines until, as we advance in this history, they can be identified by a national name, founded upon facts and conclusions. Chapter 2. Hebrew analogies with the tribes of the North, contrasted with the natives of Mexican America. Circumcision, scalping, its great antiquity, the crucifixion not known to the natives of the North, their traditional knowledge of the deluge, their practice of the laws of Moses, the conclusive proofs of the two races, the formation of a new epichean table for the history of ancient America, the announcement of the historical theory, and the first epic. The Hebrew analogies now claim investigation, and as woman is first in the affections and in memory, she claims by right upon this, as upon all occasions, the natural precedence. The northern mother, after childbirth, is secluded for a given number of days, varying according to the sex of the newborn infant. By the law of Moses, the mother's purification was to last 40 days for a male, and 80 days for a female child. All other seclusions are as strict as when the wife becomes a mother. When a wife becomes a widow, and is childless, her husband's brother marries her. These were essential laws of the Hebrew, and especially the latter, that a name should not be lost in Israel. As a mother, she considers it a regious duty, that the child should receive its nourishment from the breast that gave it life, and such is the feeling in the performance of this maternal duty, that she often nurses her offspring until it attains 3 or 4 years of age. From this fact an important problem is solved, viz., the apparent tardiness in the ratio increase of the Aborigines of the North, for it is the rule in nature's female code, and should there be an exception, it only proves the rule, that while that affection continues from the fond practice of the mother, no other shall arise to destroy that which already exists, but, as that ceases and the firstborn is put away, nature, jealous of her supremacy, again bestows upon the mother a second joy, and so continues in her undeviating course. There is, also, a direct physical analogy between the northern mothers and those of ancient Israel. If there were not, the negative might be brought against this theory. We therefore take advantage of the affirmative. The only cause of Pharaoh's political action against the Hebrews was, that from the rapid ratio in which they multiplied, they would eventually rebel, and with, or without the assistance of any other nation entirely subdue Egypt. The ease of childbirth by the Hebrew mother is distinctly stated in Holy Writ, in contrast to the dangerous sufferings of the Egyptian parent, from which fact may be gathered the cause of the gradual but certain increase of the Israelites over the Egyptian population. The same peculiar facility of childbirth is one of the chief characteristics of the northern female, for in IHE Kaki Mountains, while journeying in cavalcade, and being taken in travail, the mother will leave her companions alone, and within an hour, will remount her horse, and overtake her associates, with the newborn infant in her arms. The cause why the population of the Aborigines of the North is not in ratio with the ancient Hebrews, has already been alluded to, in reference to the mother's behalf and practice of extended maternal duty and fondness. If, as we believe, the great ancestresses of these northern women were Leah and Rachel, the tender-eyed, the beautiful and well-favored, then have their daughters on the western continent lost no features of the mothers of Israel, for they might hang their harps upon the willows of their fate, as emblems of Jerusalem's children in captivity, and feel no shame in comparison of sorrow, grace, or beauty. The northern Aborigines have a traditional knowledge of the deluge and the dove of peace, which to them under the name of the medicine, or mystery bird, is sacred from the arrow of the hunter. They have their Ark of Covenant carrot in which is deposited some mystery, seen only by the priests of the tribe. It is said to be a shell, and supposed to give out oracular sounds. This is in analogy to the book of the laws placed in the Ark of Covenant by Moses, preceding his death on Mount Nebo, the oracular wisdom of which has guided civilization to this day. The ark is never suffered to touch the earth, but is always raised on a stand of wood or stone. It is invariably carried by a tribe when they march to battle. A similitude is here to Joshua at the siege of Jericho. When it is in their peaceful encampment, it is surrounded by 12 stones carrot indicative of the original number of the tribes of their ancestors. This is strictly in analogy with the 12 statues, probably rude blocks of stone, erected by Moses around the altar of the covenant to personify the 12 tribes of Israel. Joshua, also, after the passage of the Jordan, erected 12 stones in his encampment at Gilgal, and the same number in the river at the place of the passage. They select their medicine men, carrot, priests or prophets from among a portion of the tribe, not warriors. Here is the custom of the Levites, our descendants of Aaron, being in the sacred office of priesthood, for with the Israelites they were not to be carrot taken from the ranks of the soldiery. These Aborigines dwell in booths, as when brought out of the land of Egypt, for they are still wanderers. Lev. XXIII. They offer a flesh, or burnt offering from the chase, which is first cast into the flames, before even a starving family may eat. They have their corn and bee harvest feasts, also, one in observance of every new moon, another in festivity of the first fruits, and great feast in direct analogy with the Hebrew Passover carrot, even to the blood being stained upon the posts and lintels, and the mingling of the most bitter herbs. Then their fastings and purifications are practiced with the greatest severity. The breastplate, or ornament worn by their religious prophets, containing 12 shells, or stones of value, is in direct imitation of the ancient pectoral worn by the Hebrew high priest, and which contained 12 precious stones, inscribed with the names of all the 12 original tribes of Israel. They have their cities of refuge, or huts of safety, where the most deadly foe dare not enter for his victim. They never violate a female captive, and, upon the Hebrew principle, that their blood shall not be contaminated by interunion. This has been strictly followed in all their wars with the Europeans. They also reject the savage practice of civilization upon the lofty principle of manly virtue. 1. The medicine bag, or pouches carried by every member of the tribe. It is suspended to a bead belt, which crosses the breast by passing over the left shoulder, and hangs on the right side. It contains, as they say and behave, preservatives to keep them from sickness or defeat. These acts essentially the phylacteries referred to by the Savior, and previously condemned by Moses, for the word phylactery is derived from the Greek tongue, and denotes a preservative, and in the time of Moses they were worn by his people in great excess, and so by the northern native. Moses checked the excessive use of the preservatives, and changed the custom, for by his command the priesthood alone wore the phylactery, which was at last a frontlet of parchment for the forehead, upon which was written an extract from the laws, that those that run might read. Then the absence of all idols or symbolical devices, and the worship of the one God, i.e., Great Spirit. They're never pronouncing the name Jehovah, but in syllables, and those separated by long ceremonies, thus truly fulfilling the Hebrew law, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. The name with them sounds as if written, Yehovah, and is only pronounced by the Aaron of the tribe. In their hymns of rejoicing, the word hallelujah is distinctly uttered. To the foregone analogies is to be added the general and firm belief in the immortality of the soul. But beyond all this is proof of their origin, is the practice of the great covenant between the Almighty Father and the patriarch Abraham, viz. Circumcision. And it does not exist, as in parts of Egypt and the Asiatic nations, for the purpose of supposed health, in which belief it was practiced in ancient Egypt by both sexes, but as a religious custom, handed down from time immemorial. The custom now is not general, but it does exist, and we must be understood as referring back at least 200 years in our review, to the period of the Pilgrim Fathers, when the northern Aborigines numbered millions, now they scarcely number 2.5. All the customs, however, noticed, are practiced at the present period by the uncontrolled Aboriginal. If all other evidences were not received, that of circumcision, as a religious ceremony, must be viewed by the most skeptical, as direct proof of identity between the northern Aborigines and the ancient Hebrews. The custom we have written is not general, it is only found in the more settled tribes. This even supports our belief, for in this very fact is traced again the precedent ordained by Moses, for circumcision was discontinued by the great lawgiver for 40 years, during his journeying with his followers through the wilderness. The custom was re-established by Joshua. May not this innovation by Moses in the covenanted custom be imitated by these descendants? Are they not still wanderers in the wilderness in the western, as their ancestors were in the eastern hemisphere? The affirmative has existed for ages, and it even now continues. They have not yet returned to Jerusalem. One fact is of great importance in proof of their great antiquity, viz. They have no knowledge or tradition in the north of the life or crucifixion of Christ, yet they have a knowledge of the deluge, and actually practice the laws of Moses. Again we must repeat, that we are writing of these Aborigines as they were at the time of European colonization.